winds as weaponized living creatures. This teaching presents a distinctive spiritual framework in which winds like light and darkness are understood, not merely as natural phenomena, but as living entities. These forces are described as having a house or dwelling, suggesting a spiritual origin and domain. Within this framework, practitioners of witchcraft are portrayed as being aware of these dynamics and exploiting them. The wind is weaponized and deployed in spiritual warfare to hinder believers, disrupt divine assignments, and oppose God's purposes. Sudden destructive winds, upheavals, or abrupt reversals of fortune are therefore interpreted as potentially having a spiritual source rather than being random acts of nature. Understanding spiritual mysteries for advancement. A central theme is the necessity of understanding spiritual mysteries or hidden spiritual technologies. Just as occult practitioners use spiritual knowledge to cause harm, believers are urged to gain spiritual light and discernment. Such understanding is presented as essential for mobilizing the four winds for kingdom advancement. By grasping how these spiritual forces operate, believers can resist negative, spiritual interference and actively align spiritual forces with God's will, purpose, and promises. Biblical examples of weaponized wind. Job's calamity. The account of Job 1:18-21, is presented as a key example. The great wind that struck the house where Job's children were gathered is interpreted not as a random natural event, but as a spiritually engineered act. The wind is described as being deployed with deliberate precision by Satan, not only to destroy, but to communicate despair and loss. This illustrates how spiritual forces may manipulate natural elements to accomplish destructive objectives. Jesus calms the storm. Another example is found in Mark 4:35-41, where a great windstorm arises as Jesus and his disciples cross the sea. This storm is interpreted as a targeted spiritual attack intended to prevent them from reaching the other side and fulfilling their mission. Jesus' act of rebuking the wind is presented as evidence that the wind was sentient and responsive to authority. His command demonstrates that spiritual authority can subdue these forces and restore peace. Mobilizing the winds for believers. The teaching concludes with a call for believers to take an active role in spiritual warfare. If destructive forces can manipulate the winds for harm, believers equipped with spiritual insight and light can learn to mobilize the four winds for redemptive purposes. This includes accelerating the fulfillment of divine promises, overcoming resistance, and dismantling forces of oppression. The emphasis is on operating through spiritual understanding rather than human effort alone, commanding spiritual forces to align with God's purposes and bring breakthrough, restoration, and advancement in every area of life.